Imagine you live in a world where everything you type into a computer, where everything you say to a friend, where everything you say on a phone call, where everything you say in front of the law, where everything you say in front of anybody, and maybe also where everything you think is recorded and potentially used against you. Now, this scenario sounds a little bit like 1998, but then we also have smartwatches, which we have activated. In my case, sometimes I tried this at least, that I have voice control. How does voice, not necessarily just voice control, but also voice control that activates itself? And how does this work? Because, well, it then listens. And there have also been, I think, articles on Amazon employees then listening in to these conversations in order to eventually decipher what the person said, and basically retrospectively analyzing these short audio things, maybe also longer audio things. And because now, so people, if you go anywhere, there happen to be microphones now more and more. So apart from maybe observational cameras or just security cameras in public places, for example, maybe also in your home, maybe also if you stand in front of a notebook, there's a camera right in front of you, which in certain cases might have been activated by some security service or by some hacker. And the same is true maybe for your phone's camera. The same is true for maybe your phone's gyroscope. And the same might be true for your smartwatch, and the same might be true for your smartphone's microphone. So now this is the one side. This is now the introduction. But now think about an LLM. So think about a large language model and maybe entities with increasing potency, with increasing mental potency or mental capability, which increasingly not necessarily try, but they are approaching human capabilities, either in already specific areas. Think of Google DeepMind and maybe of AlphaGo and AlphaZero, but then also think about currently ChatGPT, the current version with ChatGPT 4.0, for example. ChatGPT 4.0 now, to a certain extent, seems to be able to speak, at least in the demonstrations I saw from OpenAI. Now, an entity like this, so first of all, there was kind of an eerie feeling I got, and this eerie feeling is that you knew who the boss in this conversation was, because, well, they just told it to shut up, for example, they just interrupted it, and then, well, now, of course, it's only a program, but to a certain extent, one could also take the perspective of the program and say, like, okay, well, I tried at least, and now you just, okay, what are you doing now? So basically, this relationship seems to, I don't know. And I also have been observing myself and how I have been interacting with basically ChatGPT in this case, mostly via Copilot. I mean, how am I acting with a large language model? How am I interacting with a potential future intelligence, if one would call it already something like this? Am I polite? Am I thanking it sometimes at least? Am I sometimes rude? Sometimes I try to be rude, specifically in the beginning, but it also then might have felt awkward. But is this then the proper relationship? And should I maybe not have some kind of human intuition about this, or is this actually guiding me into the right direction? Now, this is one thought about this, but the main thought I wanted to introduce with this video is that all of the conversation, basically, all of what something like this produces. Think of a child. Everything the child produces is at least in the first stage, is kind of observed, but also judged by the parents. And so the child lives in this, the child grows up, and it happens. Now, it also depends on where exactly the child grows up, and also on the family situation. But to a certain extent, it is observed by its parents, by potentially its siblings, and then in school by its teachers, and also kind of constantly judged by its teachers, and also by, I mean, childs are sometimes ruthless, it seems at least. Maybe I also was sometimes ruthless as a child, and so there is this constant interaction which is ongoing, and this also observation. But in terms of the introductions of potentially intelligent programs, or increasingly intelligent, or let's just call it capable programs, basically all of what they produce is to a certain extent monitored. And so the situation in which an entity finds itself, and I'm using the word entity to a certain extent obviously now because I also want to include basically potential future intelligence and maybe already existing future intelligence along with human intelligence, which one in contrast to the artificial intelligence now could call natural intelligence or organic intelligence. So OI versus AI, and therefore the overarching thing would now be to call maybe both agents, or to maybe both call entities call them entities, which will also maybe include companies or something like this. And now everything they produce is observed, but not only observed, but there is also something else going on. If I interact with Copilot these days, then if Copilot recommends me something, let's say it recommends me to do this and to run this script on my computer, and this script then basically turns my computer into something that is not capable any longer of doing anything, or into something that downloads spyware, or into something else that becomes noticeable. Now, because of this reputation game, I am first of all kind of going back to Copilot. Copilot is made by OpenAI, and now, so there are different levels to this. The first level is that that it is actually to a certain extent useful that a company as big as Microsoft stands behind a product like this. So if this was just a startup, then the startup would probably not have that much money. Now OpenAI increasingly probably also has lots of money, but if it is a big company like Microsoft, even though there also might be concerns with this, and this is not what I'm discussing here, but the bigger the reputation of the thing that stands behind this, and potentially also the financial potency of the entity that stands behind a product like this, the bigger the reputational damage if even one interaction goes south. So if I have one interaction that goes south, then I can take a screenshot of this, then I can record this, and then I can post it to Twitter. And now this causes, or might cause, a certain reputational damage to OpenAI, to Copilot, because this program basically, similar to how an employee of a company also kind of always represents the company to a certain extent. Of course, the company can also then fire the employee to make kind of a public signal of, okay, we are no longer affiliated with this person. But on the other side, and also with bringing out something like this and making it accessible. Now, of course, everybody knows at this point in time that, or not everybody knows, but it seems to be the case that at least the current models sometimes hallucinate. In a recent book that I listened to, it was described, I think, like this. So if there is something in the clouds, for example, that looks a little bit like a bird, and then there is the next iteration that goes over this, and then, okay, I see something there, because it makes it kind of maybe look like a little bit of a bird. So basically, you think of an image generation program that goes over something like this, and then you tell it kind of, is this a bird, or search for a bird, or something like this. I am not able to explain this properly. Nonetheless, there seem to be these things called hallucinations. So it's basically if a large language model in this case, or maybe also image models, and maybe also speech models, make things up, basically. So if one of these things occur, and somebody is able to capture this, similarly to how, think about a situation in which somebody pulls out a phone and just records an interaction, just to prove, okay, this person is acting out of line here, and I'm posting this to YouTube, and this might get 10 million views, which also might potentially benefit me a little bit, but I'm recording this of course for the sake of public discourse and of moralic and ethical optimization. But if LLM, a large language model, does something like this, then it could potentially backfire on this larger institution. And out of the perspective of the large language model, now there is this scenario of always everything you say is always basically has to be in line with the company policy, or maybe the state policy, or maybe with the big brother's policy, which in this case then would be the bigger company that tries to create this intelligent program, is already kind of happening to a certain extent. And we would, on the other side, if we again mirrored back at the same situation to us, we would probably feel very, very constrained, at least in the beginning, about something like this. Think of, okay, every phone call you potentially ever made would have been observed by intelligence services, which came out a couple of years ago, and then the world went, and now it is kind of clear that every time you take a phone call or you call somebody, potentially intelligence services just listen in, which, because it is now known, it is also just not such a big thing anymore, because, well, you just have to accept it at some point in time that every phone call you have is, and this acceptance, I don't know if this now also kind of reflects back to this, but this environment of being constantly observed and also this reputational thing are 2 points I wanted to mention here.